Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen, and thank you for joining me for another journey into the world of shinobi. Before we begin, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who listens, supports the channel, and enjoys these stories. Today's story is titled The Blonde Uchiha. In this alternate universe, Naruto Uzumaki could handle being kicked out of his home. He could handle the loneliness of being constantly on the move. But the moment Konoha tracked him down just to turn him into Danzo's mindless puppet, that was the moment the floodgates opened. This is a fan-made story inspired by the world of Naruto. All characters in the original universe belong to their respective creators. This narration is created for entertainment purposes as part of a transformative storytelling experience. The story itself was written by Foy the Snooze button, and full credit goes to the original author. If you would like to read the original version, the link to this story is included in the video description below. If you like my content and want to keep up with future updates, hit that subscribe button and don't forget leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It not only helps me but helps with YouTube algorithm. Now sit back, relax and enjoy. Chapter 1. Something big was happening in the elemental nations. Changes, small and barely noticed at first, turned to blaringly obvious signs. Though the more experienced shinobi would say that the change first started when the Kyuubi Jinchuriki had been kicked out of his home, Konoha, into the harsh outside world. Away from all he held near and dear, as small of a group as they were, the 9-year-old blonde boy, with his eyes lowered in disappointment and his shoulders sagged, he resigned to his fate and walked off into the darkness. A monumental power shift happened many years later. Naruto was kneeling on a cliff, his sky-blue eyes looking up at the pale moon. A sigh escaped his lips and he closed his eyes. "They've finally done it," he whispered to himself. "I thought it would have been more violent." The minor scabs on her arms and rope bruises on his wrists and ankles had already fully healed. "What do I do now?" His small fists clawed the ground as he bent his head down. The boy's ears twitched and he whirled to his feet, flipping backwards away from a thrown saman. He landed on his feet smoothly and stood at his full height, an average 9-year-old's height. He frowned sharply at the 5 blank-masked ninjas standing before him, and all were in strong taijutsu stances. His frown deepened when he saw the Konoha symbol etched onto their foreheads. "Stand down, Kyuubi. You are ordered to come back to Konoha to be trained," the woman at the center droned. "I left Konoha without making a fuss or a scene." He clenched his fists, and the beginnings of a scowl came onto his face. "I left Tsuchiyaji-san, Ayame-san and Itachi-san there. I didn't complain. I didn't cry." He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "All because of Kyuubi." A hollow chuckle escaped his lips. "And you people have the gall to give me orders." The rude ninja had already been briefed on the boy. Naruto was smart, he was cunning and he was very resourceful. That was all they could gather from the very secretive boy. Naruto stopped laughing abruptly and his eyes snapped open. "Let me show you what I think of Konoha." The 2 tomos spinning lazily in each of his eyes morphed into 3, completing it. The ninja actually stepped back when they saw this. Naruto had the Sharingan. The boy's eyes began spinning madly and he sprang forward. The world around him moved in slow motion. The rude ninja drew their swords, moving like they were walking in syrup, swung the blunt side of their weapons in sync with each other at the boy, but Naruto ducked under each strike and rammed his fist into a ninja's belly, digging it so deep. He, with his arms still inside the poor ninja, ran up another ninja's front side, stomping his head so hard he formed a massive bruise and landing on the first victim's shoulders, his arm out of his stomach. Crack! The ninja never had a chance. His head spun in a perfect 180-degree angle and life left his body. Just as he was crumbling, Naruto leaped off and grabbed the lone female by her face mask and spun around her boy, dragging her into the ground face first and bringing his elbow down onto her neck, breaking it. He rolled away from hastily thrown shuriken and ran at the thrower, swerving in his running path as he went forward, and, with a wicked spinning kick, he nailed him. The result was that all feeling left his body, and he crumbled to the ground bonelessly. With deadly precision the boy sent a quick snap kick to the down ninja's neck, and his head snapped backwards. Dead. The last surviving ninja was frantic, or as frantic as a root ANBU ninja could get. He clenched his tanto strongly. His mask was broken off, showing the bruise on his forehead. Naruto straightened up and looked over the mysterious ninja's features and smirked slightly. An Uchiha. A young one for that matter, seeing as he wasn't too tall. You're coming back to Konoha, QB. His Sharingan had 3 tomos spinning in his sockets. He was obviously inexperienced in using it at this form, seeing as he was constantly blinking his eyes and shaking his head. He raced forward and swung his weapon. Naruto sidestepped the strike and dealt 2 punches on his opponent's midsection, and he ducked again and punched the other side of his midsection. The root ninja's movements slowed down. He wheezed and blindly swung again. Naruto scoffed and sidestepped and sent 3 wicked right hooks to his midsection and a strong blow to the side of his head. Blood sprayed from his mouth and he dropped his weapon. Naruto punched his chest and pulled him back when he was about to topple back, giving the ninja a rib-shattering knee to his side. The boy wasn't done with his onslaught yet. He spun around and slammed his elbow across the ninja's face, grabbing his flak jacket when he was about to fall over again. The blond boy rained down 2 merciless blows to the boy's face and swept his feet from under him. The blond Uchiha looked down at his battered opponent and frowned. Weak! He stepped on the down boy's chest and pushed down, making the root ninja wince and weakly claw at the offending foot. Pathetic! Naruto's mind went back to his first meeting with Itachi. The older boy by only a few years had said that Naruto had what no other person his age group had: untapped potential. The blond boy had been struggling to get his academy taijutsu right, not knowing that it wasn't the style in the first place. Itachi had corrected this for him, and showed him how to do the henge. This allowed him to sneak into the library and read as much as he wanted to, knowing that he wouldn't learn anything from the academy. He trusted Itachi enough to show him his Sharingan, which had 1 tomo then. Itachi had trusted him enough to tell him about the Sharingan's full form. The Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. He was 5 when he met the 12-year-old stoic Uchiha, and presently the 9-year-old secret Uchiha looked down at the ninja and a small smile crawled to his face. You will serve a purpose to me after all. He bent down and slid a scroll from out of the downed Uchiha's flak jacket, knowing what a sealing scroll was. He unsealed everything inside and washed his hand with a bottle of water, before he dug his fingers into the boy's eyes, ignoring his screams, and sealing the Sharingan eyes into the sealing scroll. Perfect, don't you think? The boy was whimpering pitifully. Thank you for your eyes, Uchiha-san. He slipped a stray kunai through the side of his head, killing him. Naruto stood up and stretched. He then began to silently gather all the equipment the root ninja. He snagged the female ninja's backpack and filled it with all the sealing scrolls, spare weapons, clothes, and every other thing. He chose to keep the Sharingan Eyes scroll in his pants pockets. He took out a map and hummed in thought. I need to get stronger. Where do I go first? From the moment Danzo made the mistake of trying to retrieve the reclusive Jinchuriki, he had sealed everyone else's fate. Naruto had disappeared without a trace after that first night, but 6 years later was when major news began to circulate. 6 years after Naruto was kicked out of Konoha, the bloodthirsty Mizukage, Yagura, disappeared from his office for about 2 hours, and when he returned he was fully repentant on what he had done. The man, till this day, was very tight-lipped on how he was so easily kidnapped, but the only person who had witnessed the event was a civilian cleric that had gone to his office to retrieve some official documents. Shirwei, the old cleric, stiffly shuffled through the upper levels of the Mist Kage Tower. The man sighed and he walked up to the Mizukage's door. He sighed tiredly, ready for the daily jab on his inability to get a raise or even a better job by Yagura. He pushed open the door. He walked in and Yagura glared at him icily before he smirked. Well, if it isn't my favorite stagnant, old man. He dropped his pen and was about to stand up before a swirling vortex opened up behind him and sucked him in. A blonde teen's head popped out and looked around. The person wore a red skull jaw half mask over his lower jaw. I'll be borrowing him for a few. He looked around the office again and shook his hair. The paint is horrible. He then blinked out of sight with his vortex. What just happened? Shirwei mumbled. The Kamui vortex opened up hundreds of miles up in the air, directly over Imigakure. At first Yugura flailed his hands until he managed to get his body under control and he spread his arms open. He felt 2 feet landing on his back and he instinctively knew that he was being used as a surfboard. Woohoo! Naruto leaned back and jammed a saban clean through Yugura's neck and a seal matrix exploded to life immediately after that, stopping him from moving or channeling his beast chakra. Nice try! The wind was whipping around them harshly, but the 15-year-old boy was under perfect control of whatever was happening. He swerved side to side and hopped up, making the Mizukage spin, and landed neatly back onto him. This time his face was up. The offending boy wore mainly black clothes, black short-sleeved shirt and ninja pants that were occasionally striped with deep red claw designs here and there. He had on deep red forearm and shin guard with thick red ninja sandals. He had on red fingerless gloves. The boy also had short blonde spiky hair that definitely fit his attire. He briefly looked in horror as he saw 3 Tomo Sharingans spinning in his eyes. Who the hell are you? Yugura snarled at his unwanted passenger. The younger boy didn't respond for a while, seeing as he was too busy using the man to dive through clouds and rolling around. The duo broke through the Imigakure rain bubble and was immediately doused by the chakra rain pouring around. I'll need you to act as bait, Naruto yelled as he spotted the Amikage tower. On 3! I never agreed to anything. In answer, Naruto knelt down on one knee and grabbed Yugura by his chin. Dude, you don't have a say in this! His eternally activated Sharingan morphed into the half-complete form, the Mangekyo, and he looked into the Mizukage's eyes. Wake up! The Sharingan-induced illusion visibly shattered. Yugura blinked frantically and was about to ask, more politely, who the boy was until the Sharingan spun again. Sleep! A finger poked to the man's forehead and his eyes turned into the Mangekyo. Sharingan. Naruto swerved away from a tall building and roughly rode down the side down to the ground. Boom! Despite the landing, Naruto jumped off the swirly-eyed man and looked around with a bored face, pursing his lips in thought before he snapped his fingers. Get ready! Against his own will, Yugura stood up shakily and hastily pulled out his signature hook staff. Naruto smirked slightly when he saw the Mizukage obey his command so quickly, without hesitation. They should be here in 5, 4, 3, 2 dash. He flew through some hand seals and murmured. Lightning release, bug zapper. He pointed at the first person to reach his position, Kisame, and before he could get his feet under him he was blown away. Nagato is mine, he said to Yugura over his shoulder. Nagato? You'll know him when you see him. You'll handle the ones that come here. Here he turned around and glared at the man. Do not hold back. Yugura nodded. Look alive, we've got company. The boy's intangibility kicked in and a scythe to phase through him. He reached forward with a clawed hand and tore through Haiden's stomach. Haiden coughed in shock and couldn't act fast enough to when Naruto ripped his spine out. The Jashin worshipper flopped forward limply, looking up wide-eyed as Naruto stabbed his spine straight into his head, not killing him but making him think through a few things, like acting before thinking. Naruto stepped over the quietly cursing man and walked forward, defying gravity by leaning far back to dodge a clanking puppet wielding swords and knives from every point in its body. He performed a clean handless backflip and his Sharingan caught sight of the chakra strings leading up to Sasori. He continued walking forward calmly, hearing the noise from the Mizukage's fight with Kakuzu and Daidara, probably with a healed Haiden too. Oh well. The teen continued his calm walk to where the Kage's tower stood tall. He stopped and looked up with his red spinning eyes at the rain shielding the tower. He turned around and a Kamui opened up, swallowing a puppet and opening another one above Sasori. The wooden man, since he couldn't scowl, settled on blankly staring at his young opponent as he tried to pry the Nidaime Kazekage off him. Naruto threw his hands at Sasori calmly and watched as a slanted pillar of rock shot at the puppet master and nailed him, throwing him far away. He turned around and continued walking to the tower. He lifted his left leg when Samahata snapped at it, and he flipped through a few hand seals. Lightning release, bug zapper. He spat out the jutsu, but as it was about to blast Kisame again, the man commanded his sword to suck it up and drain it of its chakra. Not this time, idiot! Kisame yelled and whipped his sword at the impostor. You must feel so smart right now, Kisame. He closed an eye and deadly black flames warped out of the lone open eye at Kisame, Amaterasu. The man's first mistake was ordering his sword to swallow the fire, not remembering when Itachi, his partner, had first used the Mangekyo ability against him in a spar. Samahata squealed in unrestrained pain as it wiggled out of his master hands. The black flames also coated his frilling body. Naruto allowed the man to frantically tend to his suffering sword. He kept on walking to the tower. His mind went to the training torture he had to go through before he could activate the Mangekyo Sharingan. Most weren't aware that killing a loved one wasn't the only thing an Uchiha had to do to activate his Mangekyo. He merely pushed his body well past his body's limit, used his Sharingan to do everything from reading, to brushing his teeth, to training. The half-completed form of the Sharingan came a year after he had killed the root A and Bu. Itachi had been sending him letters and scrolls on how to master the Sharingan, and how to upgrade it. At that time the 12-year-old boy had the Mangekyo Sharingan, but the Kyuubi chakra in his system that was in perfect harmony with his own chakra prevented his Sharingan from going blind anytime soon, irrespective of all the jutsu he performed with his eyes. He had never appreciated Kyuubi any more than he did at the very moment he had performed 5 Amaterasu fire attacks to carve a bloody, fiery path through Hidden Star as practice. He smirked at the memory. Though he still replaced his eyes with the first Sharingan he got, acquiring the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. He gave the nurse at Hidden Marsh a hefty amount of money for not asking questions. He held up a single ram hand seal and spat out a ball of deep red fire from his mouth, plowing through an earth attack that had been coming at him courtesy of an irate Sasori, who hadn't used ninjutsu for a very long time. Pesky puppet master, Naruto said. Your will is admirable. He kept walking forward to the wooden man that had leaped down in front of him, as well as the silver sand-using puppet that protectively hovered in front of the puppeteer. Naruto smiled lightly, an intimidating sight to Sasori. A wave of sand came at him, but he spat out another ball of molten hot fire, carving a path of melted silver until it stopped a few feet in. His Sharingan spun lazily and he held up a tiger hand seal. Fire release, Red Ivy. From under his feet spiny vines with thorns erupted and honed to the dead Kazekage. His silver sand didn't hold the attack off too much. The creeping fire vines slithered along the protective dome that had been hastily formed, creating small cracks and spider webs. He could only imagine how hot the interior of the silver dome was. Naruto walked past the occupied man coolly, knowing his attack would hold the S-rank ninja off for a full hour. His mind then went to what he had seen during the One-Tail's retrieval. How the puppet master had faced off his grandmother, and almost losing if he had not sent the man into a kamui and deposited him above Deidara. Gaara had lost Shikaku, but his life was given back to him by a trade Sasori's grandmother had made with the Shinigami. He respected strength and sacrifice, and that old woman had those in spades. He had visited her grave to pay his respects. He ran his hands through his short blonde hair as he neared the tower and caught 5 shuriken in his fists neatly and throwing them back to Itachi. The standoff was spine-tingling, both Uchiha having small smirks etched on their faces. Naruto cocked his head to the side slightly and asked, Are you going to stand in my way, Itachi? Itachi looked over the younger Uchiha's shoulder at the wreckage at his wake, from the still burning Samahata to the distracted Sasori. A bomb went off at where Yagura was holding off Deidara, Kakuzu and Haiden, making the bloody Uchiha traitor look at the younger Uchiha. He stepped aside and motioned to the tower. I'd be crazy to do that. Naruto walked to the tower and stopped beside Itachi, looking at the man. A small smile crawled to his face, as with Itachi, and he patted the older man's shoulder, not having to reach too high up to do so. Where are you going now? The Uchiha shrugged. Stay in Akatsuki, you're still needed. Itachi nodded silently. Naruto walked past him and entered the pitch-dark hallway leading through the massive building. He sniffed the air deeply and hummed, before he walked straight forward. The only sound that could be heard was the light padding of Naruto's sandals, since he knew with absolute certainty that Pain had been expecting him. Itachi wasn't only Konoha's spy. Plus, the man had discovered his hideout in Hidden Mountain, and destroyed the place. It had been a shinobi called Toby that had come after him, and he was sure he had never gone up against anyone so strong. His saving grace was his unlimited use of Kamui, Amaterasu, the Susanoo, his extensive study into jutsu, his taijutsu, and his overall chakra capacity. Toby had been forced to flee when he had been wounded by a combined Susanoo/QB beast form. He was sure the masked man was having the tailed beast chakra leached out of his body somehow. He would find him later. Now he had a god to deal with. Naruto loved Hidden Mountain. The village had taken him in without question about his past or demand him to join their forces. He had chosen to be a passive, rank-less hunter ninja that chose his missions and did so whenever he wanted. Hidden Mountain was still grateful for the addition into their forces. He had been away from the village hidden in the mountains on a mission to track Zabuza for his sword. Of course he already found the man dead, but he still stored the sword for safekeeping or in case he ever needed it. When he came back he had found Toby cutting through the mountain populace, looking for him. The thing that got him really angry was that Toby was happy. He didn't hold anything back. He entered a wide and empty throne room and sniffed the air again. He looked around with his EMS eyes and raised his eyebrows when it was the purple-haired paper jutsu user that had come out from behind the throne. "You're new. What's your name?" The woman stoically stared at the very strong intruder and answered. "My name is Conan. What do I call you?" "You may call me Naruto." "You've made a grave mistake by coming here, Naruto." The woman, who still had her hands to her side, walked forward and stood 2 feet from Naruto, staring straight at him without any trace of fear, or at his neck so he could avoid his eyes. Naruto had what you called an abnormal growth rate that made him as tall as an average 19-year-old man, while in truth he was only 15. The woman before him stood unwavering and he admired that. Little did he know that the woman admired his strength more. She mentally shook her head and ordered herself to focus. "And you've made the mistake of serving Nagato. Stand aside, lady." He cocked his head to the side and motioned for her to move, but the woman remained unmoving. "Brave but foolish." The woman's torso turned into sharp paper shards that sliced through the teen, who allowed it to phase through him. He grabbed the last sheet of paper and looked down, only to give an impressed smirk just as the explosive tag went off. Conan reformed just outside the smoke and leaned away from a thrown kunai. She swept her arms over the smoke and stray paper on the ground, blew it away, showing that there was no one inside the smoke besides a charred log. "Lightning release, bug zapper." She wildly threw paper at the attacking bolt of lightning to slow it down, and dove out of the way in time, rolling away from another lightning bolt. She stood up and flipped over the wall, dodging another bolt of lightning. The woman spun in a circle, sending waves of sharp paper out of her Akatsuki attire. Naruto phased through the paper attacks and briskly walked up to her, defying gravity again by leaning back impossibly, dodging another wave of paper. "Wind release, dead man's telescope." It seemed like a weight had settled over both occupants of the room, with the weight increasing bit by bit, making the woman's knees wobble under the strain of holding herself up and making her paper go after Naruto. Now, though the paper was too heavy for her to hold up, she grit her teeth under the strain and sweat began building on her head. She fell onto her knees when the weight tripled and used her arms to hold herself up. Naruto, with a visible bubble of air around him, stood over the woman and looked down at her. His red eyes spun slowly before he nodded and walked past her. "SSS, stop." She woman gasped as her arms shook from holding up against the invisible weight. She gasped again and strained every muscle in her body to get back up, but she was fighting a losing battle. Naruto blankly looked at her and mentally increased the weight. GGG-. The woman was desperate as she huffed and pushed with all her might to get off her knees, and again she was failing. She finally fell under the weight, and the ground beneath her caved, forcing her to fall several stories down to the first floor. The blonde Uchiha snapped his fingers just as the woman reached the first floor, making the weight lift off her. Naruto then idly looked down the hole at the woman who was lying on the ground, spread-eagle and tired. He screwed his lips to the side and contemplated killing her, before he shrugged and walked to the door behind the throne. He threw the doors to Nagato's room open and was summarily thrown away by an almighty push courtesy of the dead Yahiko. The force of the Rinnegan jutsu was so strong that he was pushed through the wall and flung into a building and into the ground. Naruto chuckled lightly and got out of the crater, stretching his arms over his head. Well, I didn't expect that. Itachi certainly didn't warn him that the Rinnegan could cloud his vision and cover the owner of the eyes briefly from his EMS. If pain could surprise him, the person that could see everything, then he would have to take this confrontation seriously. He crossed his red forearm protectors together. Let's see what you've got, Nagato. The fight shook the very foundations that Amigakure. All other fights ground to a halt, and all watched in awe as the Akatsuki leader, Pain, faced off the impossibly skilled blonde Uchiha with all his paths present. Pain had pulled off all the abilities he had in his arsenal, and Naruto countered and struck back with equal ferocity. It was a fight that went straight into the Amigakure history books. Despite the wreckage the 2 or 7 fighters were carving through aim, they ensured they didn't affect any civilian whatsoever. No civilian or aim shinobi died in the affair. After the battle, all bowed in subservience to Naruto as he stood over the last path of Pain, the animal path, plunging his fingers through her head and shattered her skull as well as her brain. We all know that the animal path is dead female, right? He had broken down Pain's door and debated whether or not to kill him. He settled on taking the man's eyes, his title as leader of Akatsuki and Amikage, and bestowing on the man a normal pair of eyes he had in a storage scroll. Pain chose to live the rest of his life in a small apartment in Aim, and Konan had sworn her life to Naruto, still loyal to Pain but was still all for world peace. Being a Kage of a very powerful village, Naruto began to set his plans into motion, but first he had to take care of a few things and kill a few people. The first person to fall to Naruto was Orochimaru. Naruto stood over the feral snake Sannin, who was covered in bloody gashes and fist-sized holes in his torso. In his hand he held a bloody tanto. His EMS lazily looked on as the Sannin tried to crawl away and at the same time struggling to keep the Kusanagi in his grasp. I came over with a proposition, Orochimaru, the teen slowly said as he stalked to the man. Orochimaru's breathing became heavier and he winced when he felt his ribs cave in a little. I asked you, politely, to serve me as my advisor. He lightly kicked the man's side and remained blank-faced as he heard his screams. All you needed to do was say no and I would leave. He reached down and grabbed the Sannin neck. I would have gone, he whispered to Orochimaru. But you attacked me. You wanted to take my eyes. He pointed his tanto behind him at Kabuto, who was nailed to the wall and bleeding all over the place. His death is your fault. He pointed to another side of the room at Sakan and Yukon, who were tied up together and headless. Their deaths are your fault. He pointed to the opposite side of the room at Tayuya, who was still coughing up some black blood. Her back was to the wall, and her eyes were bleeding heavily. You saved her from dying when those trees fell on her, but she's going to die here. He then held the tanto over Orochimaru's head and lifted him up so they were eye level. The man's legs couldn't get enough purchase on the ground to support his own weight. Naruto had butted him when he saw he was about to spit out his tongue. I thought we have established that is useless against me. The boy looked deep into the snake summoner's eyes with his Mangekyo spinning quickly. You were a worthy opponent, Orochimaru of the Sannin. He head-butted the man again. But you're a very stupid opponent, Tsukuyomi. The second person to fall was Danzo. Naruto pulled his leg back, away from a tree spike that had been flung at him from far across the training ground 44. He raised his hand for Sasori to stand down and for Kisame to come closer. Bring him to me, Kisame, assist him, Konan. The shark man grinned toothily and bowed quickly to his leader before he blurred over to the fleeing Danzo. Konan looked to her leader, into his Mangekyo eyes, and smiled lightly before she whooshed to where Kisame and Danzo were. All the members of Akatsuki were present, standing behind him as they watched Kisame and Konan match up against the Sandame's rival. He had to give the older man some credit though. He sure was stubborn. Around the S-rank Nuke Nin and Naruto lay numerous dead or dying bodies of Root A and BU. He looked down boredly when he felt his pants leg being tugged. Itachi lifted up the surviving ninja by his hair and forced him onto knees in front of Naruto. The teen blankly looked down at the ninja and raised his eyebrows. "Why are you still alive, Shinobi-san?" He nodded gratefully when Itachi removed the cracked blank white mask from his face to reveal a face that had 2 black eyes, one on each eye, and a cut lip. The person tried to talk, but his throat was too clogged up with blood. He heaved out some of the blood and spoke. "The G-Great Tree would withstand strong." He spat out some thick blood at Naruto's feet. Naruto snorted, stopping Itachi from punching the offending ninja across the face. The man would die anyways. Kakuza had thoroughly pounded most of his internal organ to paste, according to what his eyes were telling him. "This great tree you speak of is nothing but a delirious man's dreams of grandeur for a corrupted village." He was speaking about the Sandaime, the spineless Hokage that didn't stop the mob of Konoha citizens from kicking him out of the village. He knew the man knew he was being kicked out. He had Zetsu steal the dead man's journal. At least the man was remorseful. He whipped out his red tanto and sliced a clean line through the kneeling ninja's throat, cutting his jugular. He bent down and wiped the blood off on the dead man's trousers. The young but incredibly powerful boy looked up when he heard feet land before him. He stood up straight and sheathed his sword in the sheath at his left side. Danzo looked horrible. His arms had been shaved off and his legs from his knees were also gone. His right eye had been burst by a sharp paper shard when the man had been too focused on keeping Kisame from sucking out his chakra, courtesy of Konan. The shark man was holding him up so Danzo, whose head was lolling to the side, could see Naruto. "Why, you..." Naruto had his half mask hanging off his neck. Instead of answering, Naruto grabbed the man by his neck. Kisame let go and squeezed lightly. "You organized a mob, correct?" The man knew what mob he was talking about. "Hiruzen," he wheezed. "He didn't want me to train you. You were too secretive, you were." His lone eye was slowly shutting, but it snapped open when Naruto slapped him across the face. He continued like he had not stopped. "A security risk. It had to be done. For the good of Kodash." Naruto couldn't bear to listen to the dying man anymore. He squeezed his hands and the man's neck broke, killing him. He dropped the recently murdered man. "You can have him, Zetsu." No Konoha ninja could hear the sounds of battle. No Konoha ninja arrived on time. The third to fall to Naruto was Madara. Zetsu had entered his room in the Kage's tower and attempted to kill him and, of course, steal his eyes. He didn't count on the fact that Naruto was a very shallow sleeper. Or that Naruto had a secret guard. "I knew you weren't for the group, Zetsu," Konan murmured as she sliced off Zetsu's arm, the one he was using to reach for the sleeping Naruto. She quietly stepped out from a dark patch in the room and crossed her arms beside Naruto, who had sat up and leaned on the bed's headboard. "Who do you work for, Zetsu?" "Really?" Naruto said as he folded his arms on his lap. Zetsu reformed his arm and looked between both shinobi. "The question should be why it's Konan in your room instead of Itachi." Naruto ignored the plant creature's question and flickered out of sight from the bed and appeared in front of Zetsu. He grabbed his throat and forced him to look into his EMS, which had changed from the three-tonal form. "Tell me all you know." Zetsu couldn't resist the alluring pull of the Mangekyo, and he spilled everything he knew. After the interrogation, Naruto murmured, "Kato Amatsukami." And immediately after, the plant creature was under his sole command. "Take me to Madara Uchiha." Madara didn't pose as too much of a threat. It was Zetsu that personally killed the man. The blonde Kyubi Jinchuriki had annexed Hidden Sound and the entirety of Grass Country under AIM. That should have been the first indication that powers were shifting and being amassed by the missing ninja village, but this still went unnoticed. It had started slow, with AIM steadily increasing their borders even though the chakra rain still poured directly over the village. The only ninja to have noticed this was the legendary Toad Sannin. The man had notified Tsunade, the Hokage, on his observation, and the woman had summarily sent him into rain to investigate. The Sannin wasn't too much of a match for the Amikage, but he did put up a worthy challenge. Gamabunta, wielding his massive sword, hopped to Naruto, but he was easily held back by the boy's Susanoo armor. He clanged and clanged his sword against the impenetrable armor, but it didn't budge. Naruto deactivated his Susanoo and unsealed a weapon he had not used in battle before. The Kubikuribaku, the head-cleaving sword. He swung it sideways and the toad used his own sword to block the strike, though he was pushed back from the sheer strength behind the blow. The now 18-year-old boy snorted when Jiraiya had spat out a fire jutsu at him. The fire phased through him and he leaped over the toad boss to the Sannin. He brought the sword down on the man, but it stuck into Gamabunta's thick skin. Fire release, Red Ivy. The fiery vines erupted around the toad boss and seared into his skin, putting him through unbearable pain. When the heat was too much for him and he couldn't wiggle out of the vines, he yelled an apology to the Sannin and went back to the summoning realm. Naruto landed smoothly on his feet and lifted the massive sword onto his shoulder easily. He cocked his head to the when he noticed the Toad Sage's new appearance. I now see why Itachi and Kisame were hesitant to fight you all those years ago, Jiraiya the Toad Sannin. They know awesomeness when they see it, kid. You should reconsider fighting me. The man crossed his arms and on his wide shoulders 2 old toads stood. The man's skin was warty and his eyes were yellow, having that signature amphibian pupil in each. Do not underestimate him, Jiraiya-chan, his chakra levels are off the charts. Pa grunted. I know, I can sense it. And he has the Sharingan. Ma added. I know. The fiery vines wiggled high up in the air around Naruto as he responded. You are as cocky as your former teammate Orochimaru. You need to think things through. He used his free hand to motion around him at the Akatsuki members a little bit away from him, and to the aimed shinobi that were just outside the fight zone. You are in hostile territory, and you think your name is going to save you. He grasped the air above him and the rain froze, making all see the tiny droplets in midair. I control all in Amigakure. He snapped his fingers and the drops elongated till they turned into small saban, pointing dangerously at the Toad Sage. I was alone when I killed Orochimaru and his Sound 5. Do you still wish to fight me, Jiraiya the Toad Sannin? He was giving his irresponsible godfather a chance to retreat. Think about it, Jiraiya-chan, he's giving you a chance to run. Take it, Pa hastily whispered to the man he was standing on. You should listen to your summons, Naruto said. Jiraiya gulped at the rain saban that were pointing at him. The man mentally ran through all the jutsu in his arsenal and yelled out his response. Ninja art, Toad skin! He closed his eyes and the saban rained down on him, unrelenting and unforgiving. He looked like a pincushion 10 seconds after it started. His jutsu wasn't as effective as he had wanted, not counting on the fact that all the rain pouring around AIM would attack him. He wheezed and coughed up some blood. Stay back. I gave you a chance to flee honorably, but you didn't take it. You'll remind me of Orochimaru. I'm nothing like him. He sensed the boy walking to him, and he was proven correct when he was dealt a rib-shattering blow to the center of his chest. Jiraiya! A swirling vortex opened under the airborne Sannin and sucked him in, depositing him back to where he had been punched. The man regenerated immediately after all the rain saban melted off him, and the rain began pouring. Naruto raised an impressed eyebrow and his eyes swirled in his sockets slowly, gradually increasing speed. A Rasengan was sidestepped, and he bent under a left hook. The boy kept dodging the older man's attacks effectively, and 3 steps 2 ahead, until he grew bored of doing that and plunged his hand into the Toad Sage's belly. The man doubled over and his sage mode flickered off, his concentration shot from all the external chakra the rain saban had pumped into him, as well as having a hand deep in his stomach. He could literally feel the boy grab hold of his large intestine. Naruto looked at him with a raised eyebrow as he deepened the blow till he felt his ribs. He slapped away the 2 toads as they came at him. How? Jiraiya whispered as his knees slowly gave out. Naruto still had his hand in his stomach, so he used his strength to hold the man up, not even showing any signs of strain. You should have listened to advice, you should have thought things through. It sounded like Naruto really wanted the man to retreat. I gave you a chance. He frowned and dug his hand deeper, bypassing the spine and exiting his back, Some blood dribbled past the dying man's lips. "I'm sorry, kid." He slowly hunched over tiredly, and his arms limply fell on his side. Please." He apologized to his lost godson. "I can forgive, but I do not like stupidity." He twisted his arm and relished in the man's close-eyed quiet wince. The toads came after Naruto again, but were blown away by the blunt side of Haiden's scythe. "Don't interrupt me, elderly toads! Release him!" Pa yelled, going through a few hand seals for a water release. "Water dragon drilling bullets!" Kisame stood in front of the attack and commanded Samahata to suck up all the chakra in the attack, nullifying it. "Please!" Ma yelled. "Please don't kill him!" "Get them!" Naruto simply said, and all the Akatsuki members rained down on the two toads. "Ma, Pa, run!" Jiraiya used a little strength in his body to yell. His body was not responding to him in any way, making him remember the time he had been poisoned by Tsunade when he had gone to retrieve her. Kakuzu thundered to the toads and blasted drilling fire bullets at them, working with Itachi to make the fire bullets more deadly by imbuing them with wind. The toads fought in sync to counter these with water shields and a water release, sea god's typhoon, which, as the name implied, sent a massive wave of water around them to repulse the S-rank ninja. Kisame grinned widely as he expertly rode the wave and dove at the two toads. "Water release, drilling water sharks!" The deadly ninjutsu attack honed to the duo and impacted around them, splashing water around. They jumped over a razor-sharp fin that sliced under them, and Pa sent a punch to another shark, destroying it. "Tough little guys, aren't ya?" The toads ran over the waves of water at top speed, using their diminutive height to pass the S-rank ninja and grab Jiraiya by his pants, reverse summoning him back to the toad's summoning realm. Naruto looked at his bloody arm where the toad sage was formerly impaled and frowned. "Live another day, Jiraiya." Tsunade had saved her teammate's life, just barely, but she had been forced to come to terms with the fact that it was her godson, the one she had abandoned, that had done this to the man. Or that Naruto had the Sharingan. Something Minato couldn't even unlock, seeing as the man was from an almost extinct branch of the Uchiha clan, the Namikaze clan. From what the Toad Sage had told her before he passed out, he had fully mastered his eyes. She needed to stop Naruto before he got too powerful. She didn't know she was already too late. Sasuke had never been so frantic until that very moment. He was sucking up as much chakra as he could from Karen's wrist as his Mangekyo looked at the blazing inferno he had caused, despite that he knew that the person, or persons, he was against were far from harmed. He hastily pulled the odd red-haired and himself away from a thrown three-pointed scythe that was connected back into the fire by a chain. The scythe tore through the ground back into the fire, and Haiden walked out with a grisly grin on his face. "Get the job done, idiot! Boss wants him down when he arrives." Kakuzu rumbled as he too walked out of the flames. He doused the flames off Haiden's Akatsuki cloak, leaving some parts of the cloth burned off but leaving just enough to cover his lower half. His chest and arms were out in the open. He rocketed to the duo but leaped away when a Susanoo flared to life around them. "He has the Susanoo," he murmured dully, knowing from personal experience that the armor was fairly impenetrable, but from what he was seeing the armor wasn't too complete, seeing as it was just a rib cage. "Do the thing," Haiden said as he slashed the rib cage numerous times. "What thing?" Kakuzu grunted as he analyzed the armor and the smug Uchiha inside it. "That thing Itachi showed you. I know you know what I'm talking about." The Jashin worshipper huffed and slashed the incomplete celestial shell one more time before he leaned on his scythe. "Boss will be here any minute. Hurry up, you salty-ass worshipper." The calmer immortal ignored the jab and tried to remember just what Itachi had shown him before he snapped his fingers and pulled his hand back. Wind and fire chakra covered his entire arm. The man refrained from yelling at the searing pain and punched the rib cage. "Punch!" The rib cage covering the Uchiha slid backwards and the man punched more times, destabilizing the shell and allowing Haiden to leap in and bash his scythe against Karen, throwing her to where the other two members of Team Taka lay unconscious. "What do you want?" Sasuke growled as he held up his sword defensively. "Boss wants to speak to you, kid." Kakuzu grunted and walked up to him, ignoring the sword the boy held. "Stand down, Kakuzu," Naruto said from behind the duo as he stepped out of a kamui. "Naruto-sama." Both slightly bowed in recognition. He motioned for them to move away as he walked to Sasuke. "Who are you?" Sasuke glared at him with his Sharingan, but Naruto shrugged it off, staring right back with his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. "I'll be in need of your assistance." "And why would I help you?" He noted the Akatsuki robes on the teen as well as the aimed forehead protector the blonde was donning proudly. "Your team falls under Akatsuki, Sasuke, and by extension so do you. Who do you think you are?" Sasuke snarled and just barely held himself from slashing at the obviously powerful man in front of him. "Your boss, unless you wish to leave Akatsuki." There was only one way to quit the Akatsuki. Death. The black-haired Uchiha really wanted to try his luck against the blonde Uchiha, but he held himself back. This boy reminded him of Tobi, the mask-wearing Uchiha that had beat him and disappeared, except Naruto wasn't masking himself with childish joy. Sasuke slowly sheathed his sword and frowned. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to lead Hidden Sound." Despite Tsunade warning the other nations about the sheer strength, power, and skill Rain had in their ranks, they couldn't rally their forces together soon enough to defend the invasions. Naruto had Kirigakure under his thumb the moment he had freed Yagura from the Genjutsu. The man had handed over power to Mei Terumi. The woman wisely swore her allegiance to Rain and Naruto. Naruto had the whole of Grass Country, Snow Country, and Demon Country during his shadow campaigns with his loyal Akatsuki members. All fell under him. All swore their loyalty to him. Naruto took the nations and hidden villages under his grasp and commanded them, from Amigakure, to expand progressively around. Each shinobi had specific commanders, the main Akatsuki members, to lead them in the invasion. More villages fell under his at the Shadow Invasion. They didn't have a chance. Konan ducked her head slightly under Naruto's gaze. The boy, for once, didn't have his Sharingan activated. The taller 20-year-old boy gently pushed her purple hair behind her ear and smiled down at the 29-year-old woman, his sky-blue eyes glinting in secret happiness. "You've let your hair grow out, Konan." He stepped closer to her and lightly rubbed her cheek with his thumb. A light blush dusted her cheeks and she lifted her hand to hold the hand on her cheek. "You said you liked it that way." She looked up with wide eyes at her leader. Naruto laughed quietly and placed his forehead on hers. "I would like you even if you had short hair." He held her hand, gently grabbing her other hand, and held it up between them. The two were alone in a hidden Fawn command center. Even Zetsu wasn't eavesdropping. He knew just when to stay away. The weather was warm and calming, and the atmosphere was perfect. Naruto smiled a bit wider when he felt the woman's heart rate go up a bit. Konan's mouth wiggled as she smiled back, wider than she would have wanted. "I like you too, Naruto-sama." She hesitantly craned her neck up and placed a small, chaste kiss on his lips. "You can call me Naruto." He shortly kissed her back. She bit her lips lightly and kissed him again, putting her arms around his neck to deepen the kiss. This was a time Naruto was glad he had asked her not to wear his Akatsuki cloaks, him as well. He lifted her up by the back of her thighs and she wrapped her legs around his hips. The younger boy lightly squeezed the woman's butt, eliciting a quiet moan from her so he could gently slide his tongue into her mouth. Konan savored Naruto's taste and didn't offer any resistance. He ran his hands up and down her thighs slowly, making the woman feel tendrils of pleasurable fire go up her legs to her back. She moaned quietly again when Naruto increased the intensity of his kiss. He walked forward and put her sumptuous behind onto the command table. He slipped his hands into her pants, and rubbed them, and Konan slipped her hands into his shirt. He slowly laid her down, their mouths still connected. He ran his hands up her light purple shirt and thumbed her womanly breasts, and since he didn't have any calluses it felt more than good for the woman. She moaned again and her back arched up into his hands. "We should stop," Naruto muttered as he peppered her neck with kisses, making sure to suck on a pressure point in tune to her breathy gasps. "Please, no." Her legs tightened a bit around his hips, and she grasped his black shirt, pulling her closer to him. Keep going, please. Naruto sucked particularly hard as he heard her response, making her moan a little louder. I don't want to push you. He kissed down her neck. I'm not exactly good at this. You're doing fine. Yes, 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 keep doing that. She whispered her encouragement as Naruto used the bulge in his pants to grind into her core. Please don't stop. Naruto grunted as he put his forehead onto hers, making her look into her eyes, lust as plain as day. He slowly kept grinding and smirked down at her. She blushed in response and hugged him closer to her, squeaking as he pushed a little too hard. This isn't what people do before they go on a first date. He sped up a bit and grunted. He was glad though. Conan seemed to appreciate it very much if her loud moan. There, yes, yes, right there. Her soft noises were intoxicating to Naruto. I don't mind, we can go on a date later. She began moving to the rhythm of Naruto's grinding, shuddering pleasurably as her desire doubled. Naruto reached down with his hand and slipped it into her pants, rubbing her sopping wet core in sync with his erection's thrusts. Kami-sama. Naruto chuckled, but it was muffled by her hasty kiss. He thrust faster and harder, having to slip her ninja pants off her so he could make her feel much more comfortable. Her body shaking moan forced her lips away from him. Is this your first time? She nodded and pulled his hips closer, kicking her pants off her right leg. Her underwear was a cute purple dotted with flowers. Naruto leaned back so she could throw off her t-shirt, exposing her light purple brow that comfortably held her breasts. Isn't this your first? He nodded and rubbed his hardness up and down her core, still separated by 3 pieces of clothes. How are you so good? I've read a lot of books. He hastened his thrusts as her pleasurable sounds increased sharply, not knowing that telling her that little bit of information could turn her on even more. She exploded all over his pants a few seconds later. Her orgasm cascaded through her so hard she could have powered a house for a month. Naruto kept on humping her throbbing core until her arms went limp and she began heaving in deep breaths. Naruto gently kissed her lips and she lazily kissed back, too tired to resist. The blonde Uchiha sat up and smiled lightly at her. That was so good, Conan whispered. Her eyes trailed down his still-closed chest, appreciating his torso, then to his pants where his manhood was still throbbing in his pants. You're still up. Naruto looked down then back to her. It's fine, your happiness is my priority now. Conan shook her head and sat up. She held his hand and smiled. No, I want you to feel good. She nuzzled his chest before she pushed him back and had him lean onto the command table, running her hands over the bulge in his pants. I really want to do it, if you want to as well, of course. I'm not stopping you. Naruto ran a hand through her hair as she knelt down and unzipped his pants. Conan had found Naruto's soft side and she couldn't be happier. The blonde boy could be incredibly romantic if he wanted, and Conan couldn't be any more flustered. Conan had never been any more turned on when Naruto had used his bare hands to break a sand shinobi hands off when he had made the mistake of looking at her behind for too long. The sex that day was mind-melting. She couldn't walk straight for a full week. Despite being a little bit more invested in hanging out with his love interest, Naruto still had a responsibility to keep. He had to govern all the nations and villages he had invaded. Even though he now stood in front of his shinobi with Conan standing behind him to the side protectively, he was still a force to be reckoned with. No one was ready to go up against him, so it was best if they stayed on his good side and remained loyal. The last village to bow to him was Hidden Leaf, Konoha. But before he commanded his forces to plow through Leaf, he had one more thing to do. Naruto heard quiet dripping as he smoothly walked through the cave in the Valley of End, his EMS spinning slowly. He walked into a well-lit stone-walled room and walked to a hospital bed in the middle of the partially empty. He looked down at the occupant in the bed and raised an amused eyebrow at the scowl Toby had on his face as he looked up at him. You just came. He was referring to the fact that this was the same place Madara had been killed by Zetsu, and he hadn't reported about Toby staying there until that morning when the plant creature was packing out all of Madara's life work to Rain. Toby frowned and closed his eyes, seeing that his lone Sharingan eyes weren't affecting the superior boy hovering over him. The QB chakra had been wreaking havoc in his system ever since his last fight with Naruto. His eyes were slowly failing him and his internal organs were revoking. Just that morning he had 4 heart attacks. If he didn't have the medical technology he had stolen from Hidden Sound, he would have died years ago. He wasn't sure how much longer he could hold on for. Yes. Why are you here? To rub your victory in? Go ahead, I don't care anymore. I'm here to kill you. You destroyed my first home, Hidden Mountain. Remember? Yeah, I remember. They were very brave. He breathed in deeply. I respect bravery, even though they were very much outclassed. Naruto nodded as well. How am I going to die, Naruto? Honorably and with your dignity intact. You shall be remembered for pursuing peace, even though how you did it was appalling. I'll take what I can get. I'm ready. He closed his eyes and winced when Naruto jammed his pointer finger into his chest and pumped some demon chakra, making the deformed man decay before his very eyes. After this, Naruto resealed the tailed beast in the ghetto statue into 6 children, orphans he had taken into his home to live with him and his love interest, Konan. The then 20-year-old blonde Uchiha finally took over Konoha, with the Leaf Village not posing that much of a threat to his forces, though he did have to deal with Tsunade and Jiraiya, who had wised up after their encounter. He gave the 2 Sannin honorable burials for their fearlessness. This was how the elemental nations was run over by a swift power change, all caused by a power-hungry man. Naruto, finally married to Konan after 3 years of dating, appreciated Danzo for doing what he did. If he hadn't, he wouldn't have found the drive to push back. All was well. Until Momoshiki and Kinshiki attacked. Chapter 2. Naruto's official moniker as the Emperor of the Elemental Nations was the Red Emperor. Being the leader of all of the elemental nations, the Emperor was a time-consuming job, even if Naruto made use of multiple shadow clones. He had to constantly travel around with or without his family all over to ensure that everything was running smoothly, even though he knew that no one wanted to bring an uprising to usurp him. The nations were all in a tranquil harmony never experienced before. With all the IWA ninjas Naruto had commanded to move into Konoha and vice versa, the 2 rivaling villages had formed a sort of understanding. The man had separated and resolved so many fights and quarrels he wasn't sure what would happen to the elemental nations if he died. He had to get that thought out of his head. He was an Uzumaki perfect Jinchuriki with the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Needless to say that he wouldn't die naturally for a very long time. To help facilitate camaraderie among the other nations and villages, he held an annual festival hosted in Snow Country, where all sorts of fun and fanfare went down, from parades, to shinobi demonstrations, to prize contests that ended in a massive dinner held in a stadium he had sanctioned to be built. There was no need for an invitation or a gate toll, but the requirement was that violence and any criminal act was not tolerated. Still, before you were allowed entry you were thoroughly searched by black ops, metal detectors and sealed detectors. It wasn't even funny. This was the ingenious idea Konan had come up with. It was a time where no hideout was worn and all were united under Naruto's banner. Adding to Naruto's responsibility was having shinobi like Sasuke and Itachi keep watch for any sort of external threat, keeping close watch on the massive wall that separated the elemental nations from the west. Despite all this, Naruto somehow always found time once in a while to be with his family. The 26-year-old man was currently in black swimming trunks and a red vest, carrying a purple-haired boy on his neck, 2 red-haired girls on his shoulders, 2 black-haired twins, a boy and girl, under his arms, and 2 boys with mint-green hair were clinging onto his legs. The Uchiha chuckled as he awkwardly stomped around on the sandy beach, the children on him laughing joyfully at the fact that they didn't weigh him down. He flopped around playfully and flung himself into the ocean, making sure to hold on to the boy that was on his neck, a 4-year-old, and ensuring he didn't sink in the water. He trusted the other older children to be able to stay afloat. He winked at the small boy with his natural blue eyes, and his response was the boy's purple rippled eyes glowing happily. The man always had a childish side to him. Despite all the blood on his hands and on his conscience, he could still play around with his children, adopted or not. His only child was the 4-year-old purple-haired child with the implanted Rinnegan, while the other children were orphans he had adopted 6 years ago to house 6-tailed beasts, 1 in each. He considered all of them his children, but he treated his son, Rei, a little bit better because he was his blood. Despite splashing with his children, he kept a careful eye on them, making sure that none strayed too far away or went under the water for too long, a hard feat but nothing he wasn't used to. He shot an E-rank water jutsu at a red-haired twin, the Jinchuriki for the one-tailed raccoon, and chuckled when the girl yipped. His eyes strayed to his wife, Konan, and smiled at her as she lounged on a chair in a bathing suit with a striped towel around her waist. The woman waved and blew a kiss, eliciting a few irritated squeals from the children in the water. "You two are so icky, Toussaint!" the Rinnegan holder exclaimed as he tugged on his father's blonde hair. Yeah, get a room!" both black-haired twins shouted. "When you're older you'll understand what we're doing, children." He got out of the water with his 4-year-old child on his shoulder since he couldn't swim and stood beside his wife to watch the Jinchuriki children play in the water. "Play with the sand, Rei." The boy nodded and knelt on the ground beside his father to play with the sand. The Uzumaki family were on a vacation in a resort in hidden sand, the Oasis. They had the entire resort closed down for only them, mainly for privacy, but security was also the reason. There were so many Black Ops members hidden in the shadows watching his family, an intruder had to be brain dead to think he could get past. Plus he would be notified immediately if there was trouble, and he would rather tear out his Sharingan than not fight as well. He sighed tiredly and looked to his right just as a Black Ops member flickered into sight. The masked man bent down on his knees and droned. "Kazekage-sama wishes to be in your presence, Naruto-sama." Naruto nodded and signed for him to allow the sand leader to come. He looked at his red waterproof vest, and then his swimming trunks before he looked at his purple-haired wife curiously and grinned when she gave him a thumbs up. The 26-year-old man turned to the ocean behind him and furrowed his eyebrows when his children were watching him, Rei included. "It's just a small meeting, it won't take long." "You said that on our birthday and you came back 3 months after?" A mint-haired boy twin, the Four Tails holder, murmured, but it was still quite audible. Naruto refrained from frowning, opting to give the youngsters a winning smile. "I'll make it up to you, I promise." "How?" the other boy twin with mint hair yelled. He was the holder of the 5 tails. He whispered to Konan frantically. "Help me out. He'll take us to visit Konoha," the woman said, and the children cheered. Rei even began throwing sand into the air. "You owe me one." "Thanks, honey." He planted a quick kiss on her cheek and stood up straight, activating his Sharingan's first form just as the Kazekage walked out of the resort's glass double doors and padded carefully to where he was. "Naruto-sama." "Temari." He crossed his lightly muscled arms over his chest and looked down on the woman with his piercing eyes, the blonde woman not able to look up at him but rather down at the ground. The woman wore her usual battle kimono under the traditional Kazekage's robe with the wide-brimmed hat in her hand. She had been appointed as the Kazekage by Naruto personally after Gaara had fallen in battle against him. He had admired her adamant stance to not back down, but it was crumbled the moment Naruto burned through Gaara's sand armor with a single Amaterasu attack. He had to give Gaara props for putting up a fight though. The woman had been fairly surprised when he had looked down at her broken body with Kankuro in his hands. He looked into her eyes and asked her who she would choose, Suna or her last brother? She had chosen her village after begging for forgiveness from her brother, who forgave her just as her answer came out of her mouth. Naruto didn't kill Kankuro. He still served as a shinobi of sand, a royal guard to the Kazekage. The woman had chosen wisely on whether to save a single life or the life of over 1 million people, loyalty to your family or to the country. Temari had of course mourned the death of her youngest brother and had been bitter for a while, but after sitting down with Naruto and actually speaking to him, she had realized that all he had done was for the sake of peace, and Gaara just so happened to resist his attempts. The taller blonde motioned for her to walk with him away from his audience. "I came to personally invite you to the Chunin exam Suna will be hosting in 4 days." Naruto snapped his fingers and Black Ops Ninja dropped beside him, walking with them, but with a slight bow, he opened a thick red and white book and used his fingers to trace the pages. "You are scheduled to visit Sound in 2 days, Naruto-sama," his mask-wearing traveling personal assistant said to him. He had an assistant for when he was in an office and an assistant that traveled with him. The latter didn't wear a mask while the former doubled up as one of his personal guards. Shift that visit to tomorrow morning, and as a side note, it's not a family thing, so only I should go. The ninja scribbled into the book and patiently waited for his superior to continue speaking. I want the days after the visit to be clear, so all meetings that want to happen within that time are to be pushed till after the exams, only meetings of double S rank importance. The ninja wrote what was said down, and triple underlined the words only double S rank meetings. The Uchiha had the traveling assistant with him from the day he took over as Amikage and Akatsuki leader. The masked assistant was a rain ninja he had picked and tested to ensure his loyalty and honesty, like leaving wades of money in plain sight, telling him S-rank secrets and the such. So far he hadn't been disappointed, and he was more than happy to sign the assistant's paychecks. That would be all. Return to your post. The ninja bowed deeply and leaped back, disappearing in a light burst of dew. I'm always impressed when he does that, aren't you? Temari nodded in agreement. That is fairly impressive, especially in such an arid environment. Both shinobi stopped. Is there anything I should set up until your arrival for the exams? The usual security measures for my family. We will be staying in this resort. As you wish, Naruto-sama. Temari bowed. After the woman had gone back to the tower, Naruto had rounded up his children, taking a head count too, and marched them straight to their rooms in the resort. Each twin children had their own rooms. The redheads, the mint-haired, the black-haired shared rooms with their twins, while Rei slept with his parents. The children all had Uzumaki-grade tracking seals hidden on their bodies, so if Black Ops ever made the stupid mistake of kidnapping even one, Naruto would be with the poor fool in the snap of his fingers. No one was that stupid as to kidnap the Red Emperor's child. In all honesty, it was a death wish. After he had seen to each child falling to sleep, Shadow Clone, he got into his usual traveling gear. Black ninja pants, a deep red short-sleeved shirt with forearm protectors latched on. He had his shuriken and his kunai on his thigh and hip respectively, not forgetting to put on his black shinobi sandals. Over all this was a long-sleeved red and black cloak with the kanji for Emperor in gold letters on the back. Putting a wide-brimmed cap, similar to a kage's hat, but this one was gold, rimmed with red color, and at the tip was the kanji for Emperor as well. He was still trying to get used to traveling in a group, even though he had mostly been traveling with the main Akatsuki members to conquer the elemental nations. He looked down at his wife and kissed her forehead, before he quietly slipped out of the room, his loyal Black Ops and traveling assistant trailing behind and in front of him. The royal entourage traveled in a diamond formation with a square exterior a long way away from them, Naruto safely nestled in the middle. The tight ninja formation proved effective, killing bandits and thieves along the way before even Naruto could give them a second thought. He did mentally applaud them for their efficiency in movement. No motion was wasted. They reached the gates of hidden sound and the outer square shell of Black Ops disappeared, seemingly melting into the environment, while the inner diamond formation tightened a bit. Naruto simply walked up to the gatekeeper. Aware of the sun that was rising in the east, he stared with bored eyes as realization finally dawned on the gatekeeper. Emperor-sama! He flipped out of his chair and hastily got back to his feet. Dusting himself off and smoothing down his hair, he coughed awkwardly into his hand. What a surprise! I was expected, he simply said, and the Chunin nodded his head frantically. Of course, let me just go and summon Otokage-sama. The hyperventilating man dashed out of the gatekeeper's cubicle and sped through the still quiet streets of sound. The place had gone through a big remodeling after Sasuke had been appointed the leader of Hidden Sound. The place wasn't a dark, dreary, sad place where experiments were kept, but a growing place where family life could be safely sustained. Plus, the smoldering crater that used to be the Otokage's tower was rebuilt, so that's also new. He didn't even flinch when Sasuke seemingly appeared out of thin air and stood beside him, even bowing slightly at the waist. You're early, Naruto-sama. It was a tough pill to swallow, but the blonde man that shared 40% of the same blood with him was much stronger than he could hope for. When he had done some digging and discovered that Naruto had the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, the nine-tailed beast, Kyubi no Kitsune, the beck and call of all the members of the main Akatsuki as well as the Uzumaki chakra he had in his body. He couldn't match, but he was a close third, a bit under his older brother Itachi. Pardon my language, but I just want to get this meeting over with. Sasuke nodded in understanding. He too was sending Genin team to the Suna Chunin exams. Any village was sending Genin after hearing that the Emperor and his family were gracing the occasion. Yes, news in the shinobi world can travel that fast. Plus sound isn't too far from sand. Naruto waved for his Black Ops guards to disperse into the shadows to give them some privacy. What is it that you said was of grave importance, Sasuke? He noted that his fellow Uchiha was wearing a black cape and had set a large bang to hide one of his eyes a little. He deduced that was what Sasuke had called the Rinne-Sharingan. The Uchiha had said that the eyes had been blessed by the first great sage. A sketchy story he wasn't sure he could believe. The blonde wasn't greedy to say that he wanted the eyes because he had the Rinnegan implanted in his own blood, Rei. And since Rei was also part Uchiha, the eyes would probably bloom into the Rinne-Sharingan if he mastered them enough. Regardless, the blonde father would forever be proud of his children even if they didn't take the right path. As long as they don't sway because of peer pressure, he would teach them how to grab bad company by the neck and strangle the life out of it. He mentally rubbed his hands together, already anticipating the lessons he was going to bestow on his children, and he almost forgot about the man walking beside him. Did you say something? Sasuke pushed down his frustration through years of practice and repeated all he had said. I was in the Kamuiverse and I felt a strange chakra. It isn't my first time there, but this was the first time I felt life at all. As I was about to investigate, I was attacked by a behemoth man that had a single horn on his head. I also saw a smaller man give the bigger man, I think his name is Kinshiki, orders. Kinshiki called the smaller man Mamashiki, referring to him like a king. They had the Byakugan in their eyes, but they felt different. I don't know how to explain it. The black-haired Uchiha frowned to himself but still continued. And for some reason my Rinne-Sharingan was peaceful. It was like all this time it was a storm, but in their presence it calm. I haven't realized it until I came back to this universe. I engaged the bigger man in a fight and I found out that he can suck out chakra, much better than Orochimaru. He could create a weapon out of his own raw chakra with a single thought. I managed to break off his horn, but I couldn't grab it in time to escape. I apologize for this, Naruto-sama. It's fine, you did well. Where was Itachi when all of this was going on? He was inspecting the Great Border Wall. When I told him about my discoveries in the Kamuiverse, he said he had to go and see these people for himself. He should be back any moment. As if on cue, a swirling vortex materialized in front of them, and Sasuke instinctively got ready for a fight with his hand gripping the Kusanagi tightly. He released his grip when his older brother dropped out of the Kamui. Itachi stepped out of the vortex a little worse for wear, but all his body parts were still intact. His Akatsuki robe had its upper part torn off, and the shirt he wore under had a few burn marks dotted all over it. What happened to you, Itachi? Choosing not to refer to the older black-haired Uchiha as his brother for the sake of keeping the situation severe, Itachi first bowed to Naruto, who returned with a nod. All three were standing in the middle of the empty street with all the civilians being shown far, far around them by sound shinobi who knew that the three great Uchiha needed their privacy. Most still chose to stand at the edges to simply watch the three men speak. Naruto-sama, remember the Uzumaki genealogy tree you allowed me to see on our excursion to the Yuzishio remains? Naruto nodded and furrowed his eyebrows in thought. From Sasuke's description it sparked a memory of that time I read there that the Uzumaki, Senju and the Uchiha are all descended from the Otsutsuki clan, the sage, Hagoromo, and his brother, Hamura's clan. The people in the Kamuiverse fit the description very well. They have the Byakugan, the smaller man. Mamashiki seems to have the Rinnegan, but I am unsure. Both have a measurable amount of chakra. They are as pale as snow. The shorter man even called the Kamuiverse the home of the remaining Otsutsuki clan. The man took a deep breath and waited for Naruto to speak. Why do you think this? Mamashiki has the Rinnegan, aren't they in his eyes? My eyes caught a small slit on his forehead, like the great sages, and he used an almighty technique on me by just waving his hands. Itachi then thought deep, pulling up the memories his Sharingan had copied. I saw the Rinnegan in the palm of his hands, but they were red. This is curious. The blonde Uchiha rubbed his chin. What are the chances that they invade this universe? Here Sasuke answered. Very high. I overheard Momoshiki say that he wanted the power of the 10 tails for himself. Naruto clenched his fists unconsciously, barely keeping his Sharingan from morphing into the EMS. His face remained neutral, but all around felt the small air burst that came with Sasuke's last pronouncement. The blonde Uchiha looked at both of his clan's men and composed himself, even though technically he hadn't lost his cool. My family are in safe hands, referring to the Black Ops and the other main Akatsuki members that were converging on sand as they speak, already getting the message his traveling personal assistant had sent out via Hawk that Naruto was staying for the exams. The S-rank ninjas were also his personal guards, his families as well. He trusted Deidara to keep the children busy and for Kakuzu to keep the other members away. For his children's sanity, he really didn't want to go back and see his children running around, yelling Jashin-sama in pea-stained loincloths. Deidara was really good with kids, it seemed. He cleared his throat and said, Where is Kurabi? The last I heard was that he was in Kumo. That was a week ago. Who is your strongest shinobi, Sasuke? That would be Yugo. He then added in quickly. But he works best with the rest of Team Taka. I do not have to be present with them. No, it's fine, you can go with them if you want. I just wanted Kurabi to have strong backup if these two Otsutsuki appeared. Sasuke nodded gratefully. Do you have someone in hand to lead Sound in your absence? I don't know how long you're staying with Kurabi. Sakura can lead. Sasuke responded immediately, knowing that his wife of only 3 years knew the ins and outs of the Otokage Tower as how to lead Sound. She had watched him work for a while. When Naruto had appointed him leader of Sound and showed him documents, Danzo had kept describing how he had sent out Itachi to kill the Uchiha clan with a direct order. He couldn't remain mad at his older brother anymore. He was just following orders, but he wasn't necessarily happy about it. For a while as he governed Sound he had felt lost until Karen had opted for him to be reunited with his former teammates, Kakashi, Sai and Sakura. From that point it was all a sort of daze. He realized that with all the darkness that wasn't clouding his heart anymore he could finally seek companionship. He first tried it on Karen, but the red-haired had admitted that she wasn't the marrying type. Sasuke then went for Sakura and tried to build something with her, and he succeeded enough for her to give birth to their first child, Sarada Uchiha. Are you positive? Hi, Naruto-sama, she is strong enough to defend Sound and knows everything about being a leader. She was trained by Tsunade of the Sannin. Fine by me, you leave as soon as possible. Sasuke nodded. Itachi, you're coming back to Sand with me. Itachi nodded. Naruto handed a small, thick square with a complex seal drawn on top to Sasuke. This is something I learned from the Uzumaki Fuinjutsu scrolls when I was 15. It's how I found out that Hidden Mountain was under attack by Tobi. It's a tracking seal and a summoning seal combined, but the difference between that one and this one is that this one works. It can summon me to wherever you are, while that one couldn't summon me but I could track it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Hi, Naruto-sama, Sasuke said and slipped the tracking square into a hidden pocket in his cloak. Let me go and pack my things. Sasuke bowed to his superior and walked through the crowd, with the people parting willingly to give him space. Naruto snapped his finger, and his traveling assistant appeared beside him diligently. Send a letter to the Raikage to summon Kurabi back to Kumo immediately. Tell him it's of double S rank importance. Kurabi is safe and within Kumo at all times. The masked ninja saluted and disappeared in a small burst of dew. Both Uchiha then began their journey back to Sand. It turned out Sasuke and his team were a little too late as they arrived at Kumo. They came in just seconds before Momoshiki sucked out the bulk of the Eight Tails chakra, leaving Kurabi unconscious from the fight, drifting on the river that bordered Kumo by the south. Sasuke was literally just about to draw his sword and drive it through where he hoped Momoshiki's here was before both Otsutsuki disappeared in a sort of never-seen-before space-time ninjutsu. The black-haired Uchiha had never cursed so hard in his life. He had even used a Susanoo arm to carve out a tributary from the river. Sasuke-kun, please calm down, Karen said worriedly as she used a medical jutsu to skin over the unconscious Eight Tails holder. She noticed that the man was critically low in chakra, and from the carnage around her from all the jutsu Killer Bee had used, even Sasuke would have been drained. She offered her wrist to the white-haired man and winced when it was bitten into, feeling her chakra leave her through her wrist, but she wasn't worried. She was an Uzumaki. She had been born with B-level chakra capacity. She helped the older man sit up and helped tip a cup of water into his mouth. "We have to tell Naruto-sama about what happened," Yugo grunted as he sat down heavily on a tree trunk. Team Taka had been running for 4 days, stopping to make camp only when Karen was extremely exhausted. "No shit, we have to tell him," Suigetsu murmured from beside Yugo. He got up from his kneeling position so he could drink some water and hefted his head cleaver look-alike on his shoulder. "He's gonna be pissed. I'm going Kamiyas to him. The exams should be starting now," Sasuke said and motioned for the others to come closer. "Tell me again why you didn't do this from sound," Suigetsu said with a little venom. "The chakra I would need to take me so far away would drain me for days. I'm not Naruto-sama." He looked at Karen, who was helping Killer Bee to his feet. "Do you think you can stay here by yourself, Karabi-san?" The older, taller man gently pushed away from the red-haired medic ninja and crossed his arms in a classic rap pose. "He ain't no kid, you dig? You just lost more than half your chakra, B-san," Karen said worriedly. "I've been through worse, it's just my curse." B shrugged, not even knowing that he had just rhymed. "Whatever, there's no time to waste, jump in." Sasuke activated his Sharingan eyes and they mixed together, morphing into the Mangekyo. He then closed one eye and a swirling vortex spiraled out of the lone eye. He was sucked in and the rest of the team leaped in as well, leaving Killer Bee alone in the wasteland near a river behind Kumo. "Now to home and hang out with my bro, me." He whipped out a small notebook and began writing inside, sticking his tongue out of the corner of his lips as he bent his head, started walking and scribbling into the book. OML. That was horrible. The Kamui opened up just outside the door of the Chunin exams stadium, and Karen immediately put her wrist to Sasuke's mouth, felling an immense chakra drain starting up just as fast. Sasuke pulled away and rubbed the edge of his mouth before he began sprinting to the stadium, Yugo, Suigetsu and Karen in tow. The guards, knowing who he was, allowed them through unrestricted and they just outside barreled to the Emperor's box. A black ops dropped in front of him, and he yelled out the secret code to grant him passage. "Broken seal, level 9. He pushed the man aside and opened the door, bowing to Naruto as he stood up. "What is it?" Naruto said lowly. Sasuke could see that Konan was also watching. "They got to him before us." "Shit!" Naruto cursed and threw off his emperor's robe. The match that was still going on was between a Kiri Genin and a Chill Genin. "Number 1 to 5 go and provide extra protection for my children. Sasuke, you're with me, they're coming." "How do you know, Naruto-sama?" Sasuke asked as he waved for Yugo and Suigetsu to follow the Black Ops as well, offer them their added protection. "I sense different chakra." He noticed that Konan was on her feet, but he looked at her with his face set in his Red Emperor mode. "I'll need you to look after the kids, Konan. I can help dash." He cut her off. "I know you can, but they need your help as well, but your strength is needed with the other Red Cloud members." She nodded and ran out of the box. The stadium was now in a small panic seeing as the Emperor was on his feet and commanding ninja around him to get the civilians out of the arena. "Look alive!" His EMS flared to life and he leaped off the edge of the Emperor's box to the growing vortex in the middle of the empty arena. "Fire release, twin fists of 3 deaths." He murmured the jutsu under his breath and fire coated both of his arms, smashing it down into the forming Kamui. No better defense like a good offense. Earth and dust exploded after contact, and the blonde Uchiha leaped from flying chunk of rock to flying chunk of rock out of the dust. He landed just outside the attack zone and Sasuke dropped beside him, his own Mangekyo spinning in his eyes. "You must be Naruto," a smooth voice said from inside the dust plume. A gust of wind swept the dust out of the air to reveal both Otsutsuki clan members. "I have to say, you are exactly how I pictured you, small and insignificant." Naruto fought down the impulse of telling the shorter man that he was taller than him. You must be Mamashiki. I didn't bother to try and picture you. This got the desired effect he was hoping for. Kill them and bring the tailed beasts, Kinshiki. Hi, Mamashiki-sama. The massive man ran forward and a hook staff formed in his hands. Naruto smoothly unsealed the kubikaribaku from his right arm and met the attack head-on. Either fights moved an inch, but the ground beneath them reverberated violently. At the same time both pushed each other away and leaped back, slashing against each other. He sure can move, Naruto thought with a grunt as the chakra hook staff grazed over his stomach protected by a deep red flak jacket speckled with seals. When he managed to throw the man away with a fiery punch to his underbelly, he jammed his head cleaver sword into the ground, looking at Sasuke over his shoulder. Do you have enough chakra? The other man nodded. When you see an opening, go for it. As Kinshiki was lugging threateningly to him, Naruto flashed through some hand seals for his favorite attack jutsu. Fire release, Red Ivy. Beneath his feet red spiny vines exploded out, and home to the lumbering man, they wrapped around him. Ignoring his futile attempts at slicing them, not knowing that they couldn't be cut. They wrapped around him and seared off his upper body cloth before Mamashiki jumped onto his shoulder and sucked out all the chakra in the attack, not knowing that it was much too late. Chidori! Boom! The black-haired Uchiha grit his teeth as he pushed with all his might to gain entry into Mamashiki's chest. He pumped in more and more chakra, electricity arcing around him and scorching the sand beneath their feet to glass, before he just managed to slide his hand into the rock-like chest of the humongous Otsutsuki. The bigger man fell on one knee, but he glared at Sasuke and grabbed him by his midsection, about to tear the tired man in half with his bare hands until Naruto sent his own attack. Ninja art, Miss Swordsman style, 7 Hydra. He ended the chain on a one-handed rat hand seal while the other hand swung the head cleaver above his head, after images flitted out and 7 swords solidified from them, forming identical head cleavers. He flicked his wrist and all the massive swords zipped across the arena and nailed Kinshiki in the same place, the Chidori wound that had yet to heal. Kinshiki let go of Sasuke and wheezed, blood pumping out of his horrendous chest wounds. The swords continued digging through as Naruto pulled Sasuke away, hilting in the big man's chest. You did great, Sasuke. Naruto muttered, still holding the hand seals to keep the swords manifested, but dropped it when Mamashiki was about to drain the chakra, still sitting on the older man's shoulders. Take a time out, I'll hold them off until Itachi arrives. He ran at both Otsutsuki with his blade behind him and spun in a graceful circle as he got to them, just finished saying the next ninkinjutsu. Ninja art, Miss Swordsman style, Eye of the Sea God. Water began pouring out of his mouth and circling around his body like a hurricane, sharpening and grinding at both opponents, forcing Kinshiki to manifest a chakra shield to hold off against the attack. The water hurricane began to increase in size and height, so much so that all that were watching from the Suna bunkers were awed at the display. Even Kisame was impressed. Naruto had learned the war-ending swordsman jutsu in his travels before Hidden Mountain was destroyed, observing Miss Swordsman train. He only had limited practice with the Kubikiri then, but now he had mastered it. All watched as the water hurricane that had reached past the heavens began to curve inside and strike down. I grow weary of this, Mamashiki said boredly as he leaped through the sharp water hurricane, a hole forming after he had merely touched the wall, and jammed a fist straight at Naruto. The Uchiha was flung out of his own attack, and watched as all the chakra was sucked out, the water as well, into a red eye at the palm of Mamashiki's hand. The beautiful man smiled serenely and Naruto flared Susanoo chest armor around himself and Sasuke as spears of living chakra bashed against it, warping around and reforming the water hurricane but with opposite effects. The cutting was happening on the inside. From inside the Susanoo, Naruto kept his Sharingan eyes on where the 2 powerful attackers were. Frowning when he saw that Kinshiki was healing, he slapped his palms together and muttered his next jutsu. Wind release, North Wind. All was silent in the arena. It would have seemed peaceful for Sasuke if he didn't know better. Then a sound like a gong went through all of Suna and all the fighting men noticed that the sand was slowly lifting off the ground. The water hurricane had stopped turning and was destabilizing. Mamashiki even looked on with a faint smirk. Push! Then just like that chaos came, The ground hummed under an invisible strain, and all the water in the hurricane attack, that even reached into the heavens, was blasted into the air, through the clouds, just as Naruto had planned. The effect was what he had been expecting. "It's raining," Temari mumbled, in the process of throwing off her Kazekage robe to go and assist in the fight until Kankuro had tapped her shoulder. It was a glorious and horrifying sight to see rain pour down in a desert, with the sand getting soaked until Naruto murmured the next jutsu did the downpour stay primarily in the Chunin exams arena. Wind release, east and west wind. It was like Kami was using his hands to focus the rain on the arena, dousing all the fighters there. But that was fine. Still in his Susanoo chest armor, Naruto raised his hand to the air and clenched it. The rain froze and hovered in place. "Simply marvelous," Momoshiki murmured, idly noting how his foster father, Kinshiki, was preparing his chakra shields on both arms. He snorted at the man's stupidity. He could guess what Naruto was about to do, and he was proven right when Naruto pointed at him with his fist and unfurled his hand. The rain elongated and turned into lethal chakra Samban, pointing at him and his father from all sides. With a mental command, Samban rained down on them, but didn't reach even up to 10 inches from them because Momoshiki had created a bubble of air to suck out the chakra in the rain before it could reach. "Thank you, Naruto, that was delicious." "Shit," Sasuke muttered, staggering to his feet. "He negated your attack." "What now?" Momoshiki was slowly showing them just how much stronger he was. That single attack helped take down a legendary Sannin, Jiraiya. "We have to get rid of the bigger one first." "Where the hell are you, Itachi?" Itachi stepped out of a Kamui and Naruto deactivated the Susanoo chest armor. "You called Naruto-sama? Where were you?" The older black-haired Uchiha knew that his boss was getting angry. "I was securing the perimeter with Sasori." Naruto nodded. "We take out the bigger one." Itachi, technically speaking, hadn't fought with Naruto before, so he wasn't sure whether or not they were tag teaming or they were each taking an opponent. "I'll have your back, I just need Kinshiki dead." Naruto furrowed his eyebrows as he looked at the Otsutsuki duo. Momoshiki was still propped on the bigger man's shoulder, and Kinshiki now held his own massive head cleaver. "Hi, Naruto-sama. Join in when you can, Sasuke." Naruto ran over the wet sand at the two attackers, Itachi close behind him. The older Uchiha disappeared from sight and Naruto clashed swords with Kinshiki, having to dodge rain Saban idly thrown at him by Momoshiki. The fight carried on for more than 30 minutes with each fighter not giving even the slightest of openings until Fire and Earth Release, Combination Jutsu, Rage of the Fallen God. Itachi blinked to sight far behind the attacking duo, and 3 chains, made out of molten rock, shot out of the ground and attached themselves to his arms, and the last wrapped around his neck, forming a sort of full-head crown with 3 horns. The man gave a mighty heave, ignoring that his Akatsuki cloak had been burned off at the sleeves and the neck. The ground trembled and a horrific creature of the darkness crawled out. It looked straight out of a horror movie. The creature was made completely out of molten rock and some iron with some flecks of lava pouring out of its snout. It was half bull, half man. The creation jammed his fist into the crack he had crawled out of and lifted out a larger-than-life battle axe, easily setting it on his shoulder. Momoshiki clapped happily. Very entertaining. His father and Naruto couldn't spare glances at what was behind them, but Kinshiki was blessed with the Byakugan as well. The man thrust his sword at Naruto and kicked the bull man away. Naruto slid past the attack and sent a wicked spinning kick to the bigger man's jaw, not meeting it though. Kinshiki leaned away and attempted to slice the offending leg but was distracted by the molten bull man behind him. The bull had thrown his weapon, a thick chain connecting it back to it, and the bigger man caught the attack in his bare hands, not wincing when he did. The bull zipped to him and jammed an elbow into his stomach, seeing as he was also holding off Naruto with his other hand. Blood exploded from his mouth as he felt the dangerous lava boil his stomach. He dropped the molten weapon and grabbed the bull by his horns, throwing him back to Itachi, who had to roll away to prevent being flattened. Naruto capitalized on his pain by letting go of the head cleaver for a second and throwing shuriken at the stomach wound laced with Kyuubi chakra, And since the bigger man couldn't suck out chakra, he was more than wounded by the seemingly insignificant attack. My lord! He fell on his knees as the deadly chakra began to eat away at his stomach, preventing his healing factor from acting fast enough. He made sure his son was still comfortable on his shoulders as he tried to keep his feet under him. Naruto blurred to him and punched a hole through his chest. The smaller man remained unfazed by his father's pain, not even helping out in the fight. I'm dying, my lord. I'm amused enough. A red rinnegan opened up on Mamoshiki's forehead, and the beginnings of their kamui warped out. Naruto-sama! Both black-haired Uchiha yelled and pelted as fast as they could to their superior, but it was too late. The blonde Uchiha had been sucked into the kamui into the home realm of the Otsutsuki clan. Chapter 3. The Otsutsuki realm was speckled with trees that were spaced well enough to provide a good place to fight. It was also the perfect place to relax if you really wanted, with the large waterfall pouring a few miles away, and some large, widely spaced rocks that were seen from place to place. The home realm from the first and most powerful clan was also said to be the birthplace for the entire summons in the ninja world. Most weren't aware of the fact that every summoning realm was indirectly connected to the Otsutsuki realm through the elders of each summoned clan. Power could be felt in the air. A vortex opened and spat Naruto out through a few trees. The blond man whipped to his feet smoothly and leaped away when Kinshiki dropped out of the sky with a chakra hammer, destroying the ground he just stood. He looked around with his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan and lightly scowled when he realized where he was. Welcome to our home, Naruto, Momoshiki said ominously, standing on a tree branch far off the ground. I sense the Kyuubi in you. I want it. Give it to me, he said. You have to take him from my cold, dead body. Naruto growled, holding his head cleaver with both hands and clenching it tightly. He lifted the sword into the air to hold off a hammer strike to his head, flinching slightly under the weight of the attack. I will happily do that. I don't know when Itachi and Sasuke would find me. We're all alone, Q. You know what to do, Naruto grunted as leaned away from a chakra spear that formed next to his head. Kinshiki then began using the war hammer and the spear in sync with each other. I've got you, Kit, the Nine Tails said from inside Naruto. He stood up high on his haunches and looked around the blond man's mindscape. It was a beach with a big, wide chakra ocean that stretched as far as the eye could see. The red fox ran on top of the chakra ocean to the center, where he found a single, massive birch tree that had some branches sticking into the ocean, controlling the flow of chakra through its body perfectly and giving it to Naruto. Kyuubi reared back and jammed 5 of its tails into the tree's trunk, pumping his beast chakra into it. The tree took the chakra with a short hesitation but still coaxed the catastrophic chakra with the Uzumaki Jinchuriki's ocean of chakra smoothly. The ocean turned a light purple. Outside, Naruto had to spin away from a hammer chop and ran up the weapon, smashing his knee against Kinshiki's face. He bore down on the dazed man and brought the hilt of his head cleaver down on his head, and then his whole body burst on fire, forming his perfect Jinchuriki chakra cloak. The big man screamed in pain and fell on the ground with an earth-trembling thud, grabbing at the smaller man on him but screaming again as the beast chakra seared through his hand. Master! The dying man yelled, and Momoshiki rolled his pure white eyes. Must I do everything myself? He floated off the tree branch, defying the laws of gravity, and darted to Naruto. The blond man jumped away in time for the smaller Otsutsuki to land on his father and begin sucking out Kyuubi's chakra from his body. Naruto grit his teeth in frustration but composed himself in time for him to allow 5 chakra tails to explode onto the healed Otsutsuki, using the chakra creations to deflect weapons and attacks from him, and dish out his own attacks. His eyes widened in horror when a tree groaned and would shout out from the trunk, bypassing his tails and latching onto his left arm. Another shot out and grabbed his right arm. He has the Myokuton! Kyuubi roared in surprise and jammed the remaining 4 tails into the tree, turning the ocean a deep purple. Fucking Hashirama keeps on haunting me! Naruto flared his chakra and used his head cleaver to break the tree outgrowths that were grabbing him, speeding lengthwise around Kinshiki straight to the apparent would-release user, Momoshiki. He seamlessly created a clone to tackle Kinshiki as he lumbered over and flung himself at the smaller man. The pale man looked amused at him and pointed his hand at him, palm open, and the red Rinnegan glowed ominously before the Kyubi Jinchuriki was thrown away harshly, smashing through an uncountable number of trees, carving a thick line into the ground and finally stopping against a rock wall. Naruto shakily got out of the ground and lifted his sword with him, using the legendary sword to keep himself on his feet. Stubborn man, but I like my meat raw. Naruto growled at the owner of the voice and his Mangekyo spun madly in his eyes, the Susanoo exploding to life around him as he stood up straight. The legendary Ijutsu looked like a red samurai fitted with a katana in a sheath at his hip and a bow in his hand. Not wasting a single second he cocked his bow, an ethereal arrow forming in place, and he shot it down at Kinshiki, slicing through his heart and blowing up as it came out. Boom! The mountain-sized Susanoo shuffled away to separate him from the two Otsutsuki. Naruto's eyes were still zoned in on both of them. The reason he even had that bow at all was because of the Kyubi chakra flowing in him through his chakra control tree. The nine-tailed beast's chakra was so dense and heavy that it was malleable. Naruto used that to his advantage by recreating Sasuke's Susanoo bow and arrow. The attack wasn't as powerful as the real attack, but he would have to make do with what he had. Momoshiki waved his hand over the smoke and frowned deeply at his father. You are disappointing me, Kinshiki. He reached over and harshly forced the man to look at him by grabbing his white hair. Your incompetence isn't amusing anymore. I apologize, my lord, Kinshiki whispered as he slowly got to his knees. The hole on his chest was roughly the same size as his Susanoo's finger. Only you are strong enough to beat him. I know that. Your services will no more be required. The big man was then sucked into the eye on the palm of Momoshiki's hand. The smaller man turned his palm up and a small multicolored pill floated out. He swallowed the pill without a second thought, and his features changed. His body turned a deep red and he bulked up into a size much bigger than Kinshiki. Two curved horns came out of his head and his teeth turned into fangs. The man's royal robes expanded to accommodate his new body well. The slit on his forehead opened and Naruto beheld a purple Rinnegan that glowed. Sharp nails shot out of the man's fingers and toes, tearing his shoes apart, and his normally smooth white hair frizzed up and around him, cascading down to his calves. In summary, Momoshiki was now intimidating and much stronger. Fuck! Naruto and the Kyubi cursed at the same time. He hastily cocked another arrow and shot it at the man, but the man merely raised his hand and sucked in all the chakra. Not even looking at him until everything was gone, he licked his lips with a long purple tongue. Momoshiki clapped his palms at Naruto, and the massive Susanoo was blasted away. What are you waiting for? Get us there! Sasuke exclaimed to Itachi. The older Uchiha pinched his nose in frustration. He could be anywhere. The Kamui-verse is not exactly small, Sasuke. We can't just stand here, the boy said lowly as his Mangekyo slowed down and turned back to the normal Sharingan. He closed his Rinne Sharingan eye. He couldn't summon enough chakra to call up a Kamui. Unless you have a way to track Naruto-sama, I don't know what to do. Itachi ran his fingers through his hair and sighed. Sasuke furrowed his eyebrows before a memory hit him. The tracking square he gave me, I still have it. Do you think it'll work over there? It's worth a shot, Sasuke responded. He turned his head when Sasori ran up to them. Where's Naruto-sama? The wooden man asked. He looked at the destroyed Chunin exams arena, then back to the Toho Uchiha brothers. The invaders took him to the Kamui-verse. Itachi answered right away as he slipped a chakra pill into his mouth and swallowed, feeling his chakra levels increasing. Where are the rest? Guarding the bunkers. Is it safe to say they can come out now? Not yet, we need to get the boss back. Itachi's Sharingan mixed together and a swirling vortex spun out of his eyes. Hold the fort down until we get back. Itachi pulled Sasuke into the Kamui and both brothers blinked out of sight. If Sasori was able to pout, he would have. I wanted to go too. He shook off his frustration and walked out of the arena to go and deliver the news to the others. Traveling through the Kamui halfway was the most uncomfortable thing feeling. It was what one would think it would feel if you lost control of a tornado, or like you were being stretched and squeezed at the same time. especially if you were running on fumes. The Uchiha brothers were deposited out of the Kamui in a part of the Otsutsuki home realm they weren't familiar with. Snow gently fell down from the sky as Sasuke opened his Sharingan eye and grasped the cold ground tiredly, before he huffed and lifted his head up. He looked over at Itachi and struggled to his feet, helping his brother up as well. "This is new," was the first thing the older Uchiha muttered. He stood away from Sasuke and allowed himself a few deep breaths, feeling the power in the air. "How's your chakra levels, Sasuke?" Sasuke blinked in surprise. "I'm fine." He whipped out the tracking square from his cape. He channeled his chakra into the square and frowned. "It's not working perfect," he said sarcastically. Itachi took the square out of his hands. "No, we can find him, but he can't come here. We can work with that, follow me." He set out, sprinting full tilt in the general direction of where their superior was battling with Momoshiki. With Naruto, after he had been blasted into the air, he deactivated his Susanoo armor and flipped onto a rock face, sliding down its side as small balls of blue Rasengan began impacting around him. He stuck himself in place abruptly, and a Kamui swallowed 5 balls and spat them out directly behind the Momoshiki monster. And since it was too close for him to use his hands to suck the chakra off, the 5 balls grinded into his back. The Otsutsuki yelled in outrage and ran at Naruto, who held the kubikiri in both hands and ran at Momoshiki. The blonde slid beneath an overhead swing and flipped back, slicing his sword down onto the man's head, but the bigger man looked up in time and growled. "Almighty push!" The Rinnegan Ijutsu blasted the sword and the Uchiha far apart, and again smashed Naruto against the very same rock face. "I'm getting tired of this guy." Naruto muttered and sat up, using his chakra to stay on the rock. His Mangekyo scanned the bigger man and his 9-tailed beast cloak flared onto his body. He took a deep breath and purple samurai armor attached onto his body from thin air. A purple katana fizzled into sight in his hands. The man bent down into a classic samurai stance before, in a burst of fiery chakra, he sped to Momoshiki. The two fighters then engaged in a fast-paced battle of sword and claws. As an added edge, Naruto summoned all 9 beast chakra tails to bear down on the bigger man. The tails added to the samurai helmet that hid his eyes in a shadow would have been intimidating to any lesser man, but Momoshiki wasn't a lesser man. He grinned and caught a tail, sucking out as much as he could before Naruto could pull it away harshly, leaving only a short stump. "He just took a whole tail." "I can see that." "When can you regenerate it?" "A whole tail? Wow, that'll take 3 months if I rush the process, a year if I take my time." "A year? That's bad." Naruto held off a claw strike and Spartan kicked the massive monster back. "I need to cut out those eyes on his hands." "And how are you going to do that exactly? He's not going to just let you do that." "I'm working on it," Naruto mentally grunted as he dashed at the man, and just as it seemed like he would strike with his sword, he slashed the man across the face with 2 of his beast tails, pulling away hastily to think. You do that." Kyubi watched as Naruto again sped at Momoshiki, but it seemed that the man got smarter. Tree roots shot out of the ground and chased after Naruto. Naruto threw his katana to a few of the roots, cutting them, and jumped over Momoshiki with dexterity one in his sword of armor shouldn't have. He grabbed the man's head as he crossed over and strongly brought it to the ground. "May I offer a suggestion?" "Sure," Naruto grunted again as Momoshiki got to his feet faster than he anticipated and grabbed his chest armor, hefting him into the air and driving him into the ground, even throwing up some chunks of earth. "Quickly, if you don't mind." He clenched his eyes shut as the eye on Momoshiki's forehead strained and he was pushed further into the ground with an almighty push. The Otsutsuki jumped into the hole and stood over the recuperating Naruto, who growled up at him. The man grinned toothily and began dealing out harsh punch after punch at Naruto, cracking his smaller Susanoo armor and slowly sucking the beast chakra out of him. "Why not use your intangibility?" If Naruto could face palm and face plant at the same time, he would do it twice. "I forgot about that." He spared a single smirk at the bigger man who was raining blows onto him before he melted into the ground. Kyubi rolled his eyes and kept on pumping chakra through his remaining 8 tails. Momoshiki stared at the place Naruto had disappeared and jumped straight up as Naruto blasted out of the ground like a cannon. his burning fist so close to his chin if he took a deep breath he would have felt it. Both fighters burst through the clouds and kept rocketing past. Naruto, realizing that he wouldn't be able to keep going so high up, pointed a single finger up and created a small opening under the behemoth's chin, before he kicked away. He spun in the air and a bubble of air gathered around him. Blades of air then began shooting out of Naruto's wind vortex. Wind release, multiple killing sickles. As expected, Momoshiki caught the wind attacks, and just as he sucked out the last one, something in his hand caught his eye. Teehehe. He tried to shake off the explosive tag, but it multiplied and began to crawl up his body. Katsu! The explosion was beautiful. Fire bloomed in the air like a flower and wrapped around Momoshiki in its unforgiving embrace. The man's screams were music to his ears. Naruto, still in the wind vortex, opened his arms wide and the wind jutsu expanded around him and connected to Momoshiki. He flipped out and closed his hands, adding wind into the blazing inferno that encased his opponent. The blond man's fall from the sky reminded him of the time he used the Three Tails Jinchuriki as a surfboard. Wind flapped around him harshly as he observed the still burning fire from far beneath it, plummeting to the ground and fast. His red samurai armor melted off him, but his Kyuubi beast cloak remained. He commanded his remaining 8 tails to spread open and slow his descent as he kept his Mangekyo eyes on the fire high up in the air. He instinctively knew that Momoshiki was harmed but far from dead. A roar proved him right. Momoshiki summoned a massive gust of wind to blow off the fire. What remained was a semi-charred Otsutsuki with a missing eye on his left hand and a maniacal glint in his eyes. "I'm going to enjoy ripping Kyuubi out of your body, insect." He shot down to the blonde Uchiha head first, swerving away from the beast tails that darted to intercept him, and tackled the Jinchuriki, shooting to the ground so fast and so hard Naruto was sure he had cracked a few ribs. Momoshiki slowly stood up and looked down at the very resistant Uchiha. "This is the end, you have lost." He pointed his remaining Rinnegan eye palm at Naruto and began sucking out his beast chakra as well as his own chakra. "We're losing!" Kyuubi yelled, visibly watching 3 more tails turn into stumps. "I can see that." Naruto shook his head stubbornly but winced when Momoshiki put a foot on his chest to keep him still. "Lightning release, bug zapper," Itachi said as he leaped out of a tree. The attack was easily drained and shot back, but that was the point. "Earth and water release, combination jutsu, world's best trap." Sasuke finished the hand seals from behind Itachi and muttered the jutsu. The effect was that Momoshiki's feet sunk deep into the ground until he was to his midsection. Naruto too went into the ground but resurfaced beside the Uchiha brothers. The blond man sighed in relief and tapped into the legendary Uzumaki stamina to get back to his feet. "Took you long enough." Itachi and Sasuke bowed slightly to him. The younger black-haired Uchiha held his attack in place, and since the jutsu was so deep into the ground it would take Momoshiki a little while to suck the chakra. "You drop this, Naruto-sama." Itachi handed Naruto the kubikiri, and the blonde took it gratefully. "Thank you." He focused hard and his beast chakra intensified, but with only 3 tails. Sasuke released the jutsu as Naruto ran at the big man. "Amaterasu." The attack spiraled out of his left eye and washed over his victim, who was still struggling to get out of the muddy ground. "Amaterasu." He shot another column of black fire shot out of his left eye, since his right eye was closed, bathing the Otsutsuki. "Amaterasu." He kept his face set in stone as he watched the black inferno build up high, knowing that Momoshiki, if he was still alive, was in a world of pain with only one eye on his forehead to suck out chakra at a slower rate than normal after the long-winded battle he and Naruto had. His Sharingan caught the Otsutsuki crawling out of the black fire, more charred and very disfigured, but his forehead Rinnegan was still present. "I shall not die!" the man roared. His Byakugan warned him of Naruto, who had zipped to him and jabbed kubikiri at his chest, aiming to impale him, but he moved back in time. Too slow. A Kamui opened behind Momoshiki and the Kusanagi shot out, stabbing him through the shoulder. Sasuke leaped out, grabbed the sword and jumped into another Kamui that Naruto had opened for him, with Momoshiki failing trying to grab him. Another Kamui opened at his side and Sasuke slid the poisonous sword across his other arm, climbing over his body like a spider and disappearing into another kamui. Naruto moved in during the bigger man's paranoia and kept jabbing at his chest, but it kept on being dodged. A vortex spun directly above him and Sasuke landed on his shoulders. But Momoshiki grabbed his neck in a choke hold, not able to keep hold when Itachi came out of a kamui vortex beside him and shoulder tackled him forward, leaping into another kamui with Sasuke being controlled by Naruto. Naruto, though, didn't seem to be in any sort of strain. He adamantly kept throwing deadly sword slashes and strikes at the Otsutsuki. The poison working slowly in his system was fighting a violent fight with his healing factor, with his healing being slow from continuous activity. The distraction that Itachi and Sasuke were making proved very useful. Momoshiki anticipated an appearance, but it was a feint. Instead, he got a cut through his chest and Naruto skittering up his body till he got to his face. The blonde Uchiha dug his fingers through the big man's forehead, gritting his teeth to stay in place as he saw chakra being built up for an almighty push. He gave up and whipped out a kunai, stabbing the Rinnegan eye as the jutsu came out. He flipped away into a kamui and dropped between the Uchiha, watching as the semi-blind-eyed man walked around shakily with the head cleaver still impaled in his chest. Naruto blurred over silently and phased through a blow to his midsection, grabbing his sword and pulling it out. His intangibility kicked in again as another sloppy swing passed through him. He twirled his sword and cut off the man's right hand. Momoshiki stared at the stump with wide, horrified Byakugan eyes and roared as Naruto dived to it, disappearing in a kamui half a second later. Naruto slipped out behind him and sealed the hand into a storage seal on his right bicep, ducking under a rough swing and kicking the attacker's stomach. "I shall not die," the big man said in a wheezy voice as he fell on a knee, his last hand holding him up from the ground. He shuffled away from a kick to his head, but not the follow-up kick, courtesy of the blonde Uchiha. "Trust me, you're dying today," Naruto said to him as his beast chakra body expanded around him, creating a phantom version of the nine-tailed fox but with 3 tails. The fox's mouth opened wide and flaming black chakra began spinning in his mouth. He then shot it down at Momoshiki. "Super big spinning-tailed beast ball!" Naruto watched with grim eyes as the weakened Otsutsuki was blown apart by the beast ball, blood and guts in the crater his beast ball had made. Naruto looked down and mentally winced when he saw the dead body there. There was skin stretched out everywhere. Itachi and Sasuke joined him in looking down and both visibly winced. "Do you want to be sure he won't get back up again?" Sasuke asked his superior. Naruto nodded and Sasuke threw in a few explosive tags into the crater, covering their eyes as it exploded. "One more time?" Naruto shrugged. "You can never be too careful." Sasuke again threw in a few explosive tags and Naruto finished by summoning an Amaterasu attack to burn in the crater for 7 days and 7 nights. That's usually how long it lasts, you know. "You can't be too careful," the blonde muttered as his red spinning eyes reflected the black flames that burned in the crater like a bonfire. 6 years later. Naruto sighed heavily as he sat down on his emperor's desk in his office, which doubled up as the Amikage's office. He ran his hands through his hair and tapped the desk. The door opened and his office personal assistant slipped in with a tower of paperwork expertly balanced in her arms. "Good morning, Naruto-sama," she said from behind the paperwork, and as she dropped them on the desk Naruto's hope of leaving early flew out of the window. "Good morning, Satori-chan." Years of her working for him, and it wasn't unfamiliar to refer to the woman so familiarly. She was a petite lady 12 years younger than him, 20 years old, with distinguishing blonde hair that fell down to the small of her back in relaxing waves and sky-blue eyes. She was always chipper, even with all the work she had to sift through before it was presented to the Emperor/Amikage. She smiled toothily at the older blonde and cut the documents in half, dropping the first half directly in front of him and pushing the others to the side, relishing in the soul-crushing sigh Naruto took. "How was your night, Naruto-sama?" she asked as she clasped her hands behind her back, looking at him with big blue eyes. Naruto rolled his eyes and read the first document. "My night was great, how was yours?" Stars filled her eyes as she responded. "I went out on a date with this real nice guy and I thought he was cool until he tried to grope me." Naruto, outside, seemed not to care too much, but inside he perked up. And what did you do? He paused in what he was writing. She wasn't a ninja by any stretch of the imagination, and she seemed too happy to commit homicide, or was she? I asked him politely to stop or he won't get laid, 'cause I know he's the one-night stand kind of guy, but he kept on doing it. She frowned slightly. I cut the date short, and had to warm a cup of ramen before bed. The Kage chuckled and continued writing. You know you're always invited to my home. Konan-chan would be more than happy to receive you at any time. Besides, if you were having man problems you could just call your guards to stop him. Well, I don't want to scare that poor idiot away. I wanted to get laid too. She threw her hands up in her childish outrage. Of course you did. Naruto drawled and gave her a stare that yelled you always want to get laid. One would think that such a girl was a threat to him marriage, but most weren't aware that Satoru was very respectful of married men if she knew they were married. She could flirt and tease, but Naruto knew it was all fun and games. The personal assistant's office was the room before anyone could see him, like waiting room. And she didn't seem like she was in any sort of rush to go back to work. I haven't had a good lay in months. Naruto was tempted to tell her to keep her voice down, if the fact that he could hear his hidden black ops laughing under their breaths. It was always something new with Satoru. You haven't? He said dully, but the woman took what she could get. She slipped onto his desk and crossed her legs. She had on a flowing white long-sleeved kimono with an opening in the middle to show off modest black tights and her tan stomach. He kept on reading and writing the documents, keeping an idle ear on what she was saying. No, the last guy I was with, I think last week, kept on releasing early. She huffed and crossed her arms. I regret going for him anyway. I thought steroids made someone last longer. What a wiener! She stuck out her tongue in irritation. Did you know your kids are graduating from the academy today? Naruto's eyes widened in surprise and he looked at her. They are? I forgot. Satoru rolled her eyes and flipped her hair. That's why I'm here. They all passed their exams, by the way. Konan-sama says I should help bake a cake to celebrate, which I would do, of course. If you finish up fast enough you'll make it to the family party at your place. They really want you to come, please don't disappoint, Naruto-sama. The team selections should be there. She fingered through some documents and whipped out a thick file, handing it to Naruto and watching as he looked through all the new Rain genin that were to put into teams, smiling slowly as he saw the grinning faces of some of his children, and the blank-faced stare of his other children. He blinked in surprise when he saw Ray staring out of the picture with a small smirk. Ray graduated 2 years early, I know. I think he mentioned it at home. Yeah, his teachers say he inherited your brain. Naruto smiled lightly. Of course he did. He then summoned 10 clones and sifted through the Rain genin files, adding in the old genin that couldn't be put in teams. The blonde man then began the tedious work of putting the children in teams, making sure to look at it with an impartial eye. Satori allowed the man to work as she slipped out of the office and got into her chair. The man would have to spend more than a few days getting the right team together, but he found some time to eat some cake with his family. There was a lot of work to be done, and enough time to do it with the peace all the nations had fallen into. All was well. Until the West attacked. And that concludes this story. Thank you for spending your time here at Ichiraku Ramen and listening all the way to the end. Your support helps keep these stories alive and allows the shinobi world to continue through new adventures and alternate timelines. If you enjoyed the blonde Uchiha, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Once again, full credit goes to Foy the Snooze Button, the original writer of this story. If you would like to read the original version, you can find the link to the story in the description below. Let me know in the comments what story you would like to hear next. Until the next time, stay safe, and I'll see you again at Ichiraku Ramen.